The press release with the DVD collection says you are proudest of the fact that every 2 years you go on tour with new material. Did your publicist get that right?
Absolutely, and I provide those things, so there's no one making stuff up. But yeah, of course. What I found is along the way for myself, as I began in the 1960s, 62, especially when I broke up with my partner and became a single, I always described myself in the interviews.
You're talking about professionally now.
Yes, that's right. After I had established a little bit of momentum, not a great deal, but just enough to be interviewed by people, I would always let them know that I wrote my own material. I was always proud of that. I would say I'm a comedian who writes his own material, which is the way I thought of myself. Proud of it because a lot of comedians don't and didn't, still don't. And somewhere along the way, I discovered I'd become a writer who performed his own material, which was a significant thing for me to discover because it moved me out of solely entertainment into artist as well. I mean, because a writer creates out of nothing, out of his observations, out of what he or she sees around him. So,
and another way that people describe your genre, maybe you use this term, is observational comedy.
Well, yes, what you say is correct, but then I have a slight modification. I think all comedy, all writing, all art is observational. It all stems out of what we see. I think what they mean by observational is, what would be funny if your fingernails grew a little longer and you didn't, that kind of thing, the Seinfeld stuff. And I did a lot of that at one time. And I kind of went through periods of subject matter or direction, and finally have kind of arrived at a place where a lot of it is language oriented or social commentary, I think. Not to take myself too seriously, but that's what it amounts to.
Let me go back again. And George Carlin is my guest on WNYC. His new 14 DVD set called All My Stuff. I read that you were in the room when Lenny Bruce was arrested for the material in his act way back in the 50s. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes, you want details or?
Please.
You just go, okay. Yeah. It was, I don't remember the exact year. It was actually in the 60s because I was already a comedian. I was working at the Playboy Club in Chicago. I had already broken up with my partner. I was a single by then. And Lenny was working in a place called the Gate of Horn, a coffee house with a liquor license, so that it wasn't just a folk hangout and a beatnik hangout. It was definitely the Chicago folky scene. It was the beatnik into the hippie era. The transition was going on, and so that it was that sort of milieu. And Lenny worked there. I had even worked there. But Lenny filled that place. It was a really nice place. They had an old Gate of Horn, and Lenny did a lot of things that the Catholic Church didn't like. Besides, the police in Chicago are an Irish Catholic institution, and even in this city, which was the same thing was true of. He was arrested downtown. The police went after him because the Catholic Church wanted him silenced. He was really a force for exposing hypocrisy and the ugliness behind religion and the noble things that they think of themselves.
Were you friends with him?
I was an acquaintance. I would say a friend who didn't see him very often. He liked the fact that I was kind of, I had a little bit of a rebel in me, but
was that a transformational experience for you that night?
No, it was just, it's so mundane. It's so ordinary. Let me tell you, I was sitting in the audience watching the show with a fellow from a musical group called the Tarriers. We were drinking beer. We were up in the balcony area. And at one point, a policeman stood up in the audience. And believe it or not, he actually had either the irony or the good sense to say, all right, the show is over. Because that's a famous street police thing. After a suicide, everyone wants to see the body. Come on, the show's over.
There's nothing to see here.
That's right. That's perfect. Yeah, you said it right. So he said that, and they really wanted to close this club because it brought Lenny Bruce in. That was their objective. So they checked the ID of every person in the place. probably 300 and something people, and it was slow going, and I kept drinking beer, and I was about the last one out, this guy and Vince and I, and as we came through the door, because they controlled the exit by checking IDs, you could leave if you were of age, if you weren't, boom. They did find a girl who was 15, and they closed the club eventually, took the license, but when I got to the policeman, he says, ID, I said, I don't believe in ID. Which wasn't the right thing to say. He was a little tired at the end of the evening, and he was a policeman in the first place. So he took me by the collar and the back of the belt, and he escorted me to the wagon downstairs. That was the ignominy of my, with Lenny's great, famous, glorious, romantic bust. I was there for that.
But you, and we'll talk about this after a break in a minute, you had your own famous, glorious, ignominious bust in 1972.
That's true.
We'll play more clips from George Carlin, his 14 DVD retrospective, and talk to him. And we'll take your phone calls, 212-433-WNYC. Stay with us. Brian Lehrer on WNYC with the great comedian George Carlin. His new 14 DVD retrospective is called George Carlin, All My Stuff. As we were saying, you were arrested in 1972 in Milwaukee. Was that for the 7 Dirty Words routine?
Well, I was doing my act, which had all of those words in it anyway. And the problem there was, it was a thing called Summerfest, 1972, and it's done every year at the Lakeside in Milwaukee. It's a big exposition kind of fair, midway thingy. And the stage for the shows is outdoor, and the audience is all outdoor. And so the speakers carry beyond the perimeter of the theater itself.
Oh, that was the legal excuse?
That was the reason. One of the policemen actually said, "Mommies heard this." And
there certainly were no mommies in the audience.
There certainly weren't. Well, I'm sure that we had our share of every type of person, but apparently they had. The photo I have is magnificent of them walking me away. There are 6 policemen, and I have on sandals because I was wearing sandals at that time. I had my beard. I looked in this picture remarkably like Jesus, although I had denims on. And these 6 policemen, and I still have this magnificent front page photograph. My thought was, this was a verbal offense. This was called disturbing the peace, and it was not violent. It wasn't physical. 6 policemen devoted to this.
If you think the Catholic Church was behind the cops going after Lenny Bruce in Chicago that time, what was the underlying reason that act? Because you were doing the same material all over the country.
Yeah, yes.
Why there and then?
I think. Well, I can't say these things now on the radio, which would illustrate it clearly. But I mean, I was talking to the audience and saying the part of the routine was about substituting the word F with a K on the end, which they do in newspapers, as if you're not supposed to know what came in the middle.
With asterisks.
Yes.
Substituting the word.
Substituting that word for the word kill. And I had a routine about that, and some of the formulations of that sounded really, odd to the untrained ear, or the ear that didn't like me.
Or get what you were doing. Well, here is a clip of George Carlin from a 1978 HBO special riffing on dirty words.
Scene blue off color. Risque. Well, we have more ways to describe dirty words than we actually have dirty words. They call them bad words, dirty, filthy, foul, vile, vulgar, coarse, in poor taste, unseemly, street talk, gutter talk, locker room language, barracks talk, bawdy, naughty, saucy, raunchy, rude, crude, lewd, lascivious, indecent, profane, obscene, blue, off color, risque, suggestive, cursing, cussing, swearing, and all I could think of was
Do you like our quick succession of bleeps there?
Yes, that was excellent. Fast, a quick hand.